Hello, and welcome to Dig It. I'm Peter Brown, and hosting the show with me today is Chris Day. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Peter. So on today's Dig It podcast, we really welcome our special guest, David Hedges-Gower, a lawn consultant to the National Trust and the English Heritage, private estates, consultant, trainer, educator and author. Hello, David, and where do we find you this day?
But thank you. It's lovely to be here. So, looking forward to it.
Lovely. So perhaps we can begin to find out a little bit about your sort of gardening background and how you got your obviously amazing passion for everything lawns.
Well, it was, I mean, to be perfectly honest, it's quite simple. When I left school, I'm of a certain age where I think I left at about 15. I don't honestly remember, but I was very into, at the time, just at the end of my school career, I think I joined a golf team. And I went into being a assistant professional golfer. And I didn't want to be a club pro. I wanted to be Tiger Woods, like everyone at that age, I suppose. Got injured and ended up sort of working on a golf course. Wanted to sort of stay in golf course somewhere. And I got offered a sort of position on this sort of small 9-hole golf course. I ended up I was one of those, I mean, I suppose it's weird when you look back at your history, but I wasn't the most determined man in the world or young man, but I wanted to be better than anybody else. And with that sort of passion early, I got offered a job at 19 years of age to sort of take over this golf club. And I did the sort of Richard Branson sort of shaking his head sideways saying, yes, of course I know what I'm doing. But truthfully, I didn't. But equally, that was going to be my way of learning incredibly quickly. So I literally, gone through my golf career. I ended up at a wonderful place called the Oxfordshire in the 90s. Right the way through, had about 12, 13 years there looking after what was at the time probably one of the best golf courses in the world. So I've learned a lot about grass, and obviously, if I'm honest, I got to that midlife crisis sort of age and thought, I'm going to do something else. But then when I started to realise that I wasn't skilled at much else, I then went into lawn care and I've had the passion ever since. And the passion really sort of stems from, its place in our society as well. I'm not a lawn obsessive in any shape or form, but I'm obsessed with educating people, and I'm obsessed about people keeping lawns and making it easier to look after their own little patch as well.
Brilliant. That sounds like a good background then to get you into knowing a little bit about grass. I mean, I'm always blown away myself by when I get the pleasure of going on a golf course to see how fine the tees are kept. And it's amazing the amount of effort that goes into maintaining a lovely golf course, and then you get idiots like me come along and plough the whole thing up and put divots left, right and centre. It is good fun, isn't it? But anyway, can you tell us a little bit about the Lawn Association, David?
Well, it was when I moved into lawn care itself, I with the background I had and the experience, I really sort of thought, well, lawn care's got to be covered. Somebody's got to be doing it, or we're not looking for that sort of manicured golf course effect. So it must be really simple. Everyone's doing it really well. And to be perfectly honest, even a number of years later, people aren't doing it well. People don't understand how to look after lawns. And one of the things that, as part of being somebody who educates and trains people, I kind of wanted to make it more available to homeowners, gardeners, etc. And what the association is, I suppose, is a platform to learn. And it's to learn, I would say, from a simple skill set. It's not to learn about which company might look after your lawn better, not what YouTuber might be more popular because he talks funny or whatever. It's to understand the basics of lawn care. It's to understand the actual 2 or 3 plants that you've got in your lawn which I'd say 99.9% wouldn't understand. Well, that's the only part of the garden where you wouldn't understand the plant you're working on. So the association really started off, as an area to target homeowners and professionals about making them learn and understand about how simple and sustainable lawn care can be. So we've got that with the new online learning course, which has been launched a few weeks ago now.
Brilliant.
And it's really to give people, and that includes, like I said, that includes anyone who doesn't want to, whatever the perfect lawn ideology is, but it's to give people the foundation to go, actually, that doesn't sound that difficult. And it isn't. Lawn care can be and should be really, really simple. But if you listen to half the stuff that's been spoken about in the last 25 years, you probably will struggle. This gives you a complete basic understanding. It's a learning course. You've got 12 months, I think, when you join, you've got 12 months to absorb all that information. It's quite comprehensive, but it's simple. It's trying to get people to realise that there's 3 dimensions in our lawns. They're all quite obvious, of course. So yeah, it's all about education again. That's all.
I quite agree with you, David, because certainly when I was at college, lawn care and turf culture was quite involved, actually. I think it dumbed it down with the science of the soil and the types of grass, and also the machinery and the equipment to keep your lawns looking in prime condition. So maybe taking that on a little bit, where do you, the grass seed, for instance, the sort of starting point from our lawns, most of those, obviously, we're sort of fairly familiar with the ones we buy in the garden centre in boxes, in bags. But can you just explain a little bit about the different sort of types of lawn seed and how that can affect what sort of effect you get from your actual patch, your manicuring from sort of day one from sowing it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things, as I just pointed out, it's the only plant in the garden where we don't actually know what plant we've got growing in our lawn. And of course, what's already growing in your lawn is the first point everybody should look at, because it's already telling you that it likes to grow in your garden. So that's always a winner. What you don't want to look at is the grass species that aren't working. We can be a little bit led, and I'm trying to work with grass seed manufacturers to try and get people's understanding. We are without being untruthful, we are sold a lot of marketing in various forms in our lives, let alone even buying grass seed. And I'm very much someone who likes what grows in your garden. The learning course is something that does sort of help in terms of that, but it's very difficult to go around everybody's garden and try and ascertain what grass should somebody be growing as opposed to what they're being told they should, for example. So we do get a lot of things like family lawn mixtures and wear and tear mixtures. And strange enough, that particular one, we've got one of our non-native grasses called Dwarf Rye Grass. It's very much out there. It's been in the industry for a number of years. There's a little bit of a mystery about there isn't, but obviously a lot of people do have a mystery about how to look after it, because it doesn't grow in the same way that our 2 native species grow. And our native species, the strange thing is, in garden senses, our native grasses, and our native ones are called that for a reason. They grow all over the country, and they grow really well. That might be because of the soils we have. It may just be that your soils may be a certain pH, but they're native because they grow in most people's gardens in some capacity. But they're strange enough, and again, I've been trying to work with people to stop calling them luxury lawn mixtures, because it's a very odd one. I personally, I think we're in an era where luxury lawn can get pelters thrown at it from varying angles. But when the truth is it's a native grass or a natural lawn mix, I personally think it's a bit of a no-brainer myself. So our native grasses are some grasses species that have been here for a long, 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 long time. And what that history tells us, apart from the fact that they like growing here, but they also tell us that they grow in a very different manner to some other grasses. They're very adaptive. Certainly, one of the two native species, for example, grows sideways. We call it stonoliferously. So I call it a gap filler, basically. But that's how the plant grows. Rather than growing vertically too much, it keeps growing sideways, and then as you prune it and scarify it, it produces more plants within itself as well. So that's a great grass to have in your lawn if your lawn can obviously grow it. It's not the easiest thing to do. We've got another grass species that we call fescue, and that comes in various guises. There's creeping red fescue, there's chewings fescue. There's a number of different ones. I try to sort of get people to sort of forget the interpretation of what species I might have, because no one, even myself, wouldn't be boring enough to get down with a microscope and go, yeah, I've definitely got 5% of creeping red as opposed to what I thought would have been chewings fescue, etc., etc. I think we've got to bundle them all in as 2 or 3 main grass species and go, well, if one of the fescues is growing well, then I need to learn how to maintain it. But it's the starting point that we do with everybody. Everybody I teach, we go, right, let's look at what grows, because that's nature telling us what we need to grow in the future. Forget whether you're being marketed something, perhaps. There are grass species that will wear better. For example, the ryegrass definitely wears better. But people tend to sort of go, well, maybe that's the answer of me not doing much else to it. But we all know from the side of football pitches that, the linesman creates, I don't think you can call them linesmen anymore. They call something else.
Lines people, aren't they?
Assistant referees, that's the one, isn't it? We know that if you have somebody running up and down, or a dog running up and down on the lawn enough, they will damage any grass, whether it be heavy wear or not. The main question about wear and tear here is it's as simple as anything else. And the National Trust, learned this very quickly, was to go, well, if you've got 100,000 people going in the same area, there isn't a grass that will survive. But you've got to look at why is the plant dying in the first place, and what am I doing to correct that, and then am I doing any more to that area than I am to my normal area? So grass species are, as I say, the grass is a wonderful plant, and our native ones are incredibly good, and they can look after most lawns. But of course, we're not able to buy that particularly in turf these days. So turf seed tends to come from, the dwarf rye fescue mixture. But they are very different in the way they grow. So learning how they grow, and again, that's where the learning course will teach you, for example, how does ryegrass grow in comparison to fescue? It's quite obvious if you know, of course, but not many people would. Most people put grass as grass. It's green most of the time, so it can't be any different. Well, they are, unfortunately. They grow differently, they react differently, and they'll give you a completely different lawn in the same way.
Okay, thank you. And David, if we move into a new house that maybe the lawn isn't in that great a condition, what's the best time to sow, and sort of how's it best to prepare the site for sowing a new lawn?
Well, it's a bit like anything, I suppose. Preparation is obviously key, but equally, I think one thing with grass for itself, when we think of sowing grass seed, we tend to think that we've got, in fact, we do obviously have a number of different species all in a same box or whatever. But technically speaking, grass seeds come in different sizes. So if you look at ryegrass, for example, it'll have a much bigger seed pod, which means it can absorb a lot more moisture, which means it can obviously warm up a bit quicker as well and then germinate. So different grass species will germinate at different times, even at slightly different temperatures. Okay. But obviously, soil temperature is more important than, it being bright sunshine, for example. there's no right and wrong time, if I'm honest. I mean, if I said, in fact, I tried to germinate some grass seed last February, and it germinated really quickly. It didn't turn into a lawn very quickly, but it did germinate.
Right.
So you can start as early as you wish. Just don't expect the English weather to give you exactly what you want. And that's, the key. As much as the grass seed is good and as much as our preparation is good, nature's the key to all of this. We can have gold-plated grass seed, but if the temperatures aren't warm, it won't work. So the way I look at trying to germinate grass seed in terms of weather-wise, when exactly, we used to sort of think that autumn was better than spring. Well, autumn's very much a time where we know we're going into winter, which means that temperatures are dropping. We may have a bit more moisture around to help germinate, but we're definitely going to get colder weather, which again isn't great for seed germination. If there was an honest answer for what the best time, it's probably during the warm weather, because you can germinate it really quickly.
Yep.
The downside is you've got to water, obviously. So, I think in most cases in the UK, I personally think April and May are the two best months, in my opinion. In terms of preparation, again, it's the one time you've got to do something properly. Whatever you do to your soils now is going to help you certainly within the next few years, to be perfectly honest. So when you prepare anything, you've got to think a little bit sometimes outside of the box. You've got to look at the fact that soils, for example, aren't all the same. So you may have clay soils. If you do have clay soils, you've got to think about having too much moisture retention, perhaps, or certainly not needing to irrigate as somebody has told you to do. You've also got to think about water percolation if you've got a new build, for example. So there's a lot of different factors that you need to think about. In terms of preparation itself, as I say, it's the one time you've got to do something. If you can add any sort of organic matter into that sort of top profile, even if you apply some, I would say, soil conditioner, pre-seeding fertilizer, that kind of product, those are essential to get in the early stages, because the key, one of the biggest keys to seeding success is actually not just to germinate it, but is to have that little baby plant have some food and nourishment to put, to absorb in the soil as it's starting to germinate, is really, really key. And you can turn a seedling into a plant, in no time at all, if the lawn has got some food and soil conditioner already in the preparation or the prepared area.
Yep. Because I know when I recently had some patches in my lawn, what I did was I gave the surface a good raking up to start off with, and then I put some new topsoil down, and then sowed the seed into that. And to be fair, it seemed to do quite well. Is that the type of thing you'd recommend, or what should I have done?
Well, the one again, I like people to think when it comes to lawns and problems, and so with the way I think about it, I would go, well, why has the patch died in the first place? Why have I got a bare spot? What's the cause of it? Now, it could be a dog, of course. It could be a plant overhanging. It could be anything. It could just be a lump of concrete in the ground that burnt off during the summer and didn't recover. It could be lots and lots of factors. But essentially, I always say to people, well, look at that reason first, because that's the starting point. You don't want to put new grass seed down when the problem hasn't been removed. So that's one of the real big issues. And it might be that particular area is perhaps just a compacted bit of soil. Your lawn soils will differ, from meter to meter to meter to meter, and there'll certainly be some areas that would die off just purely because they didn't recover after a dry spell or a wet spell even. So, sometimes it's a case of maybe going, well, actually, let's think about the growing medium first. Let's correct the problem that was the cause in the first place. And that might be scratching it. That might be getting through that little bit thatch layer. It might be just doing something like hollow tine aeration, for example, where you remove the plugs. So if you've got a dog urine, for example, if you can add some drainage improvement to help get that ammonia through your root profile, then the seed's going to have a much better chance as well. So the critical thing is trying to identify what the problem was, try and resolve that before you put your grass seed down. That way you'll probably get a lot more quicker successful germination on it.
Yeah, David, I'm thinking on the process of having sown the seed, and it's germinated well, and Mother Nature's been kind, and we're getting those lovely April showers, and everything's going to plan.
Yeah.
What sort of treatments would you sort of recommend for your fairly newly sown lawn? Is there anything you'd sort of recommend for that first season?
Again, I think the main thing to think about when you've germinated, if we are lucky to get germination, we've got a lovely climate over here, as we know, that does help us germinate grassy without us using too much water. But the main thing you've got to think about is the fact that you've got, first of all, you've got a problem. Secondly, you've got a seedling, and they vary in size as well. So again, germinating some of the different species is not the easiest thing in the world, but as I say, nature helps us with that. The main thing then you've got is a seedling, and we all know that seedlings are young baby plants, quite fragile, and quite prone to variations of heat or stress or herbicide or whatever people are throwing at it. So the main object that people want to do really, and it's certainly important in the first few months, is certainly to feed your lawn more than you normally would, because what you want to do is turn that seedling into a big, lovely, healthy, fat plant as quickly as you can, because that way it can withstand the dry weather, it can withstand the different sort of problems that it might have. So feeding it in that first few months is critical, but get used to just feeding it more than you normally would. It's not something you've got to do for very long, but that's the critical bit. You turn your little baby plant into a grown-up plant that can look after itself. So there's lots of obviously different feeds. I'm a great believer that we've got some wonderful products out there nowadays that are a little bit environmentally friendly. We've got one made from composted recycled food waste, which is the best lawn feed in the world, in my opinion. And I don't mean that by just saying it, but it actually is. I think the sustainability aspect is good, but also you can put it on new seedlings. You haven't got to worry about polymer coating. You've got something which can make the grass grow very, very safely and also sustainably, which I think is certainly important as well.
David, do you think it's useful to go down the liquid feeding route as well, or would you say a granular feed is a better option for those newly forming plants?
I think at the end of the day, every lawn is different and every scenario is different. We get very different weather patterns. The idea of liquids, obviously for those that don't know, liquids obviously go into the leaf very, very quickly, and they can work really, really well. Sometimes if I'm being honest, the difficulty can be in the application of a liquid fertilizer. They have application rates. Sprayers have application or water volume rates, so it can be tricky. One thing that the association is doing is trying to make that understanding for homeowners a lot easier, so that liquids can be used in conjunction. But liquids are very quick in and out things. They can be reactory things. So if we do want to feed the plant really, really quickly, and we don't necessarily want to irrigate the lawn, for example, then getting a liquid is a little bit safer than some fertilizers, not all. But as I say, the calibration can be a little bit it can be very ambiguous, because again, how much we've got this sort of strange sort of thought process in the country that you dilute fertilizer in a liquid form, where you don't at all. You're not diluting it ever. You can put less of an application rate on, but you've sort of got to understand how much is coming out of your nozzle on your sprayer at the same time. So one thing that we're doing at the association is trying to make that more understandable for people and simple. So we pre-calibrate little battery sprayers, for example, so that people can start to use liquids a little bit more. As we know, the fertilizer prices have rocketed all over the world at the moment, and the one thing that hasn't been or certainly has gone through it better than anything is liquid feed. So liquids are I think liquids might in the future become a little bit more important personally, but it depends. Every lawn will be different, every weather scenario will be different, every soil will be different, every time that somebody sprays will be slightly different. So there's no real winner. I think the only thing with granules, if you can use an organic type feed, they will release fairly quickly as well, but they can all work. There's no one perfect scenario with feeding your lawn full stop. It's a mixture of a number of different things that might be easy for you, they might be more useful for you, but again, that's an experience that you almost need to have and learn as well on your particular lawn.
Excellent. And just wondering, David, if you could possibly name drop the fertilizer you like that's made out of food waste, because we always like to share top tips like that with our listeners.
Well, well, strange enough, the conversation that I should be having with Chris, I think, as well, because it's something that is now available in the garden centre world as of fairly recently at the moment. And it's one that's actually available in different parts of the garden. So what actually it is, and the composted recycled food waste part is very important. It's also obviously very sustainable, but it's also a soil conditioner at the same time. So it's something that I utilised in my sports industry background, and has been in the sports industry background for a long time, and I fought really because the product was so good. I fought to get it into the retail outlets. So the product is called True Garden Range. So we've got True Grass for lawns, obviously. We've got True Yield for crops and vegetables, and we've got True Bloom for flowers as well. And it is as remarkable as I say it is, and I wouldn't say that lightly, if I'm honestly, but
excellent.
But it's sustainable, it's safe, and in this case, it comes in a handy little tube as well, which is again an applicator in itself. So it's very, very useful. But what it does to the one thing, if I had to teach anybody about feeding a lawn, is to go back to any plant specialist and say that the key to feeding any plant is to feed the soil. The plants will take up whatever they can then. If you keep feeding the leaves, which liquids can do, and they do have a purpose, you tend to just feed the leaf. That's it. You don't get too much sort of root development. You don't get too much strength to the plant. So, as I say, liquids tend to be reactory things. So, you've got certain products now, which we're hopefully launching soon, which will green up your lawn for an event, for example, if you've got a barbecue, and it won't particularly do that much apart from what it says. It'll green it up, and if you want a stripy lawn, it'll make the stripes stand out even better.
Yeah.
But it's got to remember that it's not. It won't ever replace a granule, but it can enhance the purpose that you're trying to achieve when you're feeding. That's all.
Okay, thank you. I guess the next question with regards to we've sown our imaginary first lawn,
yes,
and we've been feeding it diligently. When should we start thinking about cutting it?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because again, I suppose to a point, there's no right and wrong of when you should cut it. Cutting is strange. I'll just slightly off water, but I mean, mowing is a pruning technique. So when we let grass grow too tall, we lose all that energy. So when we look at mowing frequently, we don't say it because we want anyone to be obsessed with their lawn, but the whole point, especially if you're feeding a lawn, is that you give the plant energy and then you stop it from growing and going in your compost bins, and that becomes fairly easy then because the plant does the rest for you. So it's really, really important to not think I haven't got to do anything. It's a seedling. It's in the ground, and I'll probably do some damage if I do go on it. Well, of course we can, without question. On a lot of places, like I say, if you germinate a lawn and don't start to get that thickening over that first period of 3 or 4 weeks, then you're open to the elements. So if it's a little bit thin, it can be too damaging to suddenly get a mower on there. The first key would be for anybody to say, well, obviously mow when it's dry, but try and mow without a roller for a good few months as well. The less damage you can do, whether it be pushing over worm casts or anything at all, use a rotary mower with just a very, very sharp, beautiful blade that isn't going to damage and tear those new little fragile seedlings. So there's no rule of thumb, if I'm honest. But as I say, if you do feed your lawn, it will obviously, if you feed it at the time of seeding, for example, or even at the first signs of germination, it will grow quicker than some that you've been used to.
Right.
But just realise that, yes, you can do damage, but is the damage balanced out by the fact that you're starting to prune the leaf blade already? You're starting to force the growth sideways to thicken to get to the goal where you want to be. So, as I say, there's no rule of thumb, but I would use a rotary mower. I would use a very, very sharp blade. Always buy a spare blade when you get a mower from anywhere, garden centre or otherwise. Sharpen it up, change it as often as you can, and certainly in that early stages of seeding, you don't want to be putting this plant under stress at all. So, yeah, there's no rule of thumb. Again, I think you've got to learn and think what damage you could do, because ultimately we would be the one doing the damage. Nature won't damage it. It succeeds. It'll be when we come on to doing the bit that we want to do that we start to incur the damages ourselves.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so David, my next subject really is watering. Now, whether it's a new lawn or an existing lawn, obviously there's always a big debate whether you should, keep your lawn very well irrigated during the summer, or, if we have a drought, when we've got hosepipe restrictions, should we let our, lawns brown? As we know, they recover very quickly. So what's your thoughts then on this imaginary newly sown lawn? What sort of watering regime should we aim for?
Yeah, I mean, the watering debates are, it's one that is a completely separate issue, isn't it? You could talk about that forever, I suppose. I always say to people, especially when you're, if you have constructed a new lawn, for example, with a new seed bed, you should be in reality close to where soil should be. Now, look, lawn soils, or certainly lawn soils, but probably any garden soil should have 25% water storing capacity in them anyway. That'll obviously be different if you've got a slightly poorer soil. If you've got a more clay soil, for example, or a sandy soil, come to that. So you started off, again, if you can start off with the sort of idea of trying to make your soils good, that they're more receptive to using the water. One of the problems that a lot of people have is that they'll overwater. That then incorporates that soil to become panned and compacted, and then start to not use the water that you're putting down. So I'd always say, well, if you're doing it properly, then try and enhance your soil at that early stage, because it will mean somewhere along the lines you won't have to water as much. In terms of watering a new lawn, I mean, it's one of those things. The quicker you can get it established and turned into a big fat lump of grass, the better, because obviously that will be able to store more water. It'll be able to store more food. It will improve root development because it's a stronger plant as well. And then it will be able to absorb more moisture, but obviously less so, if that makes sense, in terms of less watering. And again, I think, your lawn tells you what's going on. In that early stages, if you're starting to see, brown spots appearing on your newly seeded area, for example, it might tell you the soil there's a little bit different to another part of the garden, perhaps. It's not always that you're not watering that particular plant. It might just be a soil type in that particular area. So again, learn from it, perhaps investigate a little bit, and somewhere along the line, your watering program in between your sort of, I suppose, your moral obligation and your requirement, somewhere along the line, you will water as much as you feel that you should do. There's no right and wrong, because at the end of the day, we all know that we can jump into a drought at any time of year these days. We can also have the opposite effect of new lawns, where we have a very wet summer as well. So again, it's we may not think we're watering, but of course we are. But it may be trying to remove the water away from our grass seedlings as opposed to take the water in. So I'd always say to anybody, just, if you've done preparation, good. If you perhaps added some, the things like the soil conditioners that can absorb moisture in the surface, things like that, then you'll use less water, I'd say. But somewhere along the line, you'll know when to stop. I personally, I'm a great believer that plants are incredibly durable and versatile things, and grass is no exception. So overwatering in the early stages is a real bad thing to do. So let it fight for its water, let it go looking for it. But like I said, there's no rule of thumb. Everyone will do it differently. Everyone will have different water pressure, times a day that they put it on, etc., etc. There's so many different fractions that can be different. But you'll learn yourself if you want to look.
Fair enough.
Yes.
And I suppose now moving through into autumn time, what do you think about autumn? I mean, should we still be cutting the lawn through the winter? I mean, obviously it slows down its growth massively, but any thoughts on treatments and fertilizers? Obviously you get the evergreen autumn lawn food, which we sell sort of a fair few tons of, but I'm guessing by that it does work and it is a benefit. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, again, I don't think there's any right or wrong about, because not everyone obviously wants to feed a lawn, but obviously those that do are looking for a stronger, healthier lawn, and feeding in the autumn is an absolute, without question. Any fertilizer itself will. I mean, they're so different. It's unbelievable. Even the evergreen products compared to the true grass. I mean, they're like chalk and cheese to a point. But ultimately, the plant, in a lot of cases, especially with nicer lawns, people do box the clippings off, which means that you've got to replenish lawn food. And as I said earlier, one of the absolutes we know that we're going to get in the autumn is that it's going to get colder and it's going to get wetter, and the plant's going to be under a little bit more stress. So certainly feeding in the autumn is critical. How much to put down? Again, everyone will put a different amount on. And then again, that's one of the keys, where if you've got well-balanced lawn feeds, they can be certainly better suited for the autumn than others. But ultimately, yes, I would say to anybody, feed your lawn. I would say timing-wise, autumn, I'm not quite sure when autumn is these days, actually. I know it's meant September, October, but
October, November,
yeah. It's a very tricky one to say when it is, but I think, one thing, if you are feeding your lawn regularly, the main thing is, if you're putting products down that are going to last, 8 weeks, 10 weeks or whatever, you need to be thinking about applying your following one before that 10-week period, for example. So you've always got to think of overlaps. But when it comes to autumn feeding, sometimes slightly earlier is better. If you go too late into the season, you can perhaps make the plant a bit weak, a little bit sort of fat, if you like, with a bit too much food in it, when it's not going to work as much over the next few months. So without question, I would always say to anybody, feed in the autumn. It's quite important. Feeding at any time of the year is important. There's in my opinion, one of the strangest areas of not feeding lawns is during the winter. It can be fed with a completely different product, but it's probably the most critical one that we have in the UK, and that's because of the moss control factor in it. But that's another story. It's another product that is out there, unfortunately, or will be in a few weeks' time. But yeah, autumn absolutely key. If you want your plant to be strong and healthy to go through that winter period, late autumn, early winter period, with a bit of strength, a bit of durability, and also a bit of cosmeticness as well, it's absolutely key.
David, on the we've talked about overseeding the lawn earlier on, but sort of this time of the year, we're in obviously the month of March. What other things should we be thinking about doing to existing established lawns? Is there any other sort of key treatments you'd sort of recommend we cast our eye over?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, certainly the two, if not three really, the two critical things are, again, this goes back to learning about your plant again. The two critical bits are pruning your plant to give you increased vigor and growth and plants, and undoing the damage that nature does. Now, nature, and that's through aeration, of course. So if you haven't aerated your lawn yet, then you've got a couple more months to think about aerating. Now, the reason aeration is done or needs to be done on UK lawns is it's purely down to our environment. We get obviously a fair amount of rain in the UK, but we also get droughts at the same time, and both do damage to our soils just naturally. It's not that we cause compaction because we're playing football on it every day. But the aeration basically is going to change or alter your soil structure. So when you spike a lawn with a garden fork, essentially you're probably doing more damage than good, to be honest, because if you've got a fairly solid mass, you're just wiggling a solid mass into it. So if anything, you almost compact around it. But with a hollow tine fork, you remove plugs. And the idea of the plugs coming out of your lawn, it means that those can collapse and fall in amongst themselves now. And when they do that, they create new sort of drainage channels for water to percolate down, new little avenues for roots to grow down as well, and obviously nutrients as well to make their way down. So although a lot of people think, well, it's a bit over the top to aerate your lawn or to hollow tine your lawn, it's basically a way of balancing out what nature's just done to it. And that might be the drought that we had in the summer. It might be the fact that we've just come through a wet period. So that's really critical. It's a bit like repotting a plant in lawn care terms. We can't obviously repot our lawn, but we can certainly add benefit to the soil where we can. And that's the one key thing that everyone in this country should be doing. In terms of the pruning of the plant, again, it's more like a spring clean. We all know what a spring clean does to our houses and gardens and where we tidy everything up. Well, the spring clean is really sort of removing some of the decaying organic matter or thatch that we call it, which it can be, clippings that have fallen off, for example, and not been digested by the soils properly. It could be a number of different things. We could be mulching our lawn and putting a lot more material back into the ground. So doing that kind of thing is essential, purely in as much, and again, don't get me wrong, scarification can be done badly as well as it can be done well. But it's a pruning technique, and if it's done regularly, you don't need to, ruin your lawn. It's a case of combing out dead material so new plants and shoots can grow into those spaces to enhance the look of your lawn again. It's simple, really. It's just simple plant maintenance techniques that should be done by everybody. And if everybody did it, you'd be surprised how many people would have beautiful lawns, because you're enhancing the soil. We all know that plants grow in the soil, and we're enhancing the plants at the same time. So they're both key, both absolutely key.
Excellent. And just thinking, I love stripes on my lawn, and I know there's a bit of a debate about robot mowers or electric robotic mowers versus the standard sort of go out and mow the lawn once a week. Can you give us some hints on what your thoughts are as to, are robotic mowers better for the lawn because they're continually mulching the lawn, or what are your thoughts?
Well, again, if we go back to the simple fact that mowing is a pruning technique, and the more often and in fact, I often say to people who make the best mowers, who are the best mowers in the world? Well, a lot of people go, well, I don't know, Honda or Husqvarna or something, and you go, no. Who mows grass the best in the world? Well, we know that that's lawn professionals, turf care professionals, golf courses, etc. So what do they do better than us? We tend to go, well, they use really expensive mowers, so that's the key. Well, they don't actually. They use robots and rotaries all over the world, and the key part to it is that they're mowing more regularly than we do. So when it comes to robots, the one thing that you can obviously program robots to do is mow more than we want to mow. You can have them out there 7 days a week, trimming. So in that respect, the benefit of robots is very good. The downside is that, you know, you can forget about your lawn a little bit. They can become a little bit too automatic, and sometimes you forget what's going on your lawn. You lose, obviously, the benefit of the well-being, the mental health and well-being of mowing your lawn. I think there's a lot to be said for
and the exercise.
Yes, going out there and washing all your thoughts away with a couple of hours lawn mowing. It's very therapeutic. So, and again, they become, you know, robots can be a bit too automatic in as much as, again, if you don't think about it, your blades might be blunt and you're damaging your grass as much as you think you might be benefiting it. I think they're very much going to be the future, but at the moment, I like a stripe, but then I just like healthy grass, so I'm not personally a massive fan, but I can understand why. I think robots have still got work to do. I'm working with some of them myself in terms of pest control techniques and things like that, because, you know, that's, well, it's something obvious to me, but it's not obvious to many people. But, you know, we don't have pest control products, but a robot can be a fantastic addition, because if you stop pests laying eggs, the problem disappears. And how would you do that? Well, a lovely little robot running around annoying the pests is a very simple, sustainable technique. So I think they will have a bigger future, but I think it will take longer. It's taken a long time now. I do like them. I've got one on my daughter's lawn, and I think it does a great job. It's not great during winter. It's not great during leaf fall and twigs and everything else. There's always a time when we have to intervene still, and I'm sure there always will be. But I think they can be a great addition. But ultimately, every lawn mower is about the sharpness of a blade. They're just like cars. You know, we choose different cars for various reasons. We very rarely ever say, well, that one doesn't go forward like the other one, only in terms of speed, of course. But they all go back as a forward cars. We just choose them for various reasons. It might be the color, the dashboard, the shape, and lawnmowers are very much the same. The critical bit is the lawnmower blade. If you don't have that sharp, then your plant won't be any good anyway, whether you cut it 7 days a week or once a week with a stripe mower. So, but again, it's something, again, trying to work with mower manufacturers to try and make. Strange enough, I've got an ultimate mowing guide, which you might be interested in. It's free from the association, actually, but it's there's a surprising amount of knowledge in there that people wouldn't believe you had. I wouldn't say you had to do with you when you mow a lawn, but there's certainly advice there that you would adhere to at times that you wouldn't think was necessary or whatever. But it's critical. It's critical to mow the grass well. I always think, you know, there's a difference between mowing the grass and cutting the grass.
Okay.
I think a lot of people with rotaries, you know, we start it up and off we go. That's mowing a lawn. Cutting a lawn is actually, you can still do that with a rotary, even though cylinders are believed to cut grass better. But ultimately, if you use a rotary mower and you look after your blade and sharpen it on a regular basis, that's cutting grass as well. And that's the one key thing on a lawnmower, is to try, if you want it good, cut it. Don't just mow it. Just get a lawn.
You're raising a really interesting point there, because I was always taught, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lawnmower blade should be as sharp as a butter knife. Would you agree with that, or do you think it should be more like a razor blade?
It should be more like a razor blade. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't know where. I mean, essentially, you're going on the lawn with what is a very high speed scythe, I suppose.
Yep.
And that's what it is. Now we all know that we're probably of a certain age that we remember scythes and people mowing grass with scythes, and those blades are as sharp as
No, you're not wrong. I can remember my grandmother and grandfather had a lovely old scythe with a handle that came out, and as children we used to love sort of going into the meadow and chopping grass with it. And you are right, it was incredibly sharp. But I'm pleased. I will go and get my little sharpening stone out and take it to the lawnmower blade again then.
We should have I mean, this is something that, again, I've been trying to get people to do. I mean, we can obviously sharpen blades in various ways, but there must be a very simple device that could be made by somebody, some clever engineer that sharpens the blade much easier for the average homeowner, There is something out there, I'm sure, but there isn't. But there should be. We can invent, pin cameras to sit on a spaceship up in the sky. We must be able to make a sharpening tool that you literally just sort of run over the end of a blade or something, I'm sure. But it should be one of the most important bits of somebody's gardening or lawn itinerary. That's critical, absolutely critical.
And just as a rough idea, how often, say we're mowing our lawn once a week, would you be sharpening the blade once a week or more like once a month? I mean, how quickly will it dull?
Well, the thing is, there are so many factors that obviously dull a lawnmower blade. Firstly, in modern society, our steel that we use is very soft these days in comparison to days gone by.
Right. Which
means that those factors, and it doesn't mean stones, of course, although that obviously will do damage, but the grass species themselves, if they're lacking moisture, then they become a little bit more dry and durable, and they can sort of lose an edge quite quickly. So again, there's no rule of thumb. I mean, personally, I say to everybody, just buy a spare blade. If you want to change it every week, it's really worth doing. If you want to do it every 2 weeks, it's better than not doing it at all.
Okay.
Many people do it once a year, and they often go, yeah, the lawns look a bit dull now. Doesn't look very good. In fact, you notice it more, and you'll notice it now because I'm going to tell you, but in the next few months, you'll start to look at gardens and lawns, and you'll see quite a few yellow ones out there.
Yep.
And that's purely because the mower blade hasn't been sharpened, it's been chopped down too quickly, and immediately you put your lawn under stress, and we're the ones that want it nice. So it's not difficult. It's just, it'll be different for you. You might want to do it every week, but as I say, buy a spare blade. You've got a week to sharpen it. It's probably about 2 minutes to sharpen any blade anyway. It probably take longer to swap the blade over, but it's critical. With a blunt blade, you stop the plant being able to take food and water up, and that during times when there's not a lot of water around, that can lose colour in your lawn really, really quickly. So it's, as I say, it's the most important thing in many respects that a homeowner has to do.
I was going to say, David, it's almost like using some very blunt secateurs in the garden, isn't it? You pay the price for poor implements at the end of the day, and I think a lot of people send their lawnmowers off to service every autumn or during the winter, and of course it gets maybe sharpened at that point, but of course by which time you come to the middle of the year and it's running out of sharpness. So I think it's a really good point. On that side of things, obviously we are continuing to cut our lawns well into the winter now because of global warming. What's your thoughts on that? Is there a definite sort of stop time, or do we just work with the lawn and work with the weather?
Well, there's a lot of factors, obviously, over winter. I mean, it's a strange one. I brought a saying out a few years ago, and if it doesn't stop growing, then don't stop mowing. And you certainly don't on professional sports grounds, for example. Again, the people that are mowing properly. So what you'll find on a lot of lawns in the UK, of course, you'll find lawns that don't grow very well. Therefore, people, don't necessarily need to cut them either. Apologies about that. Somebody's just started a printer in the background, so I do apologise. Okay. So we've got that factor as well. There's a lot to be said about keeping the leaf blades dry as possible over the winter time as well. So, topping your lawn off with a very high setting on a blade on your mower, can be quite a good, I suppose, preventative practice as well. It just helps the leaf blade dry out. It almost actually sort of brings it back to life a little bit. So again, I think it's very much down to each person. Do I cut mine? Absolutely. I don't cut it very often, but I do still make the plant think it's alive. I make it look a bit prettier in a period where perhaps it doesn't. I think we will have to concentrate on winter mowing more than we ever have. We almost haven't really had a winter yet, and certainly lawns have been growing incredibly well. We did a video actually on is February the new spring, and we've scarified a lawn on 1st of February, and we're doing another sort of catch up soon to show people that if you can't do anything wrong particularly, then we're going to have to look at changing our mowing practices and maybe our scarifying and other practices. Nobody's got the answer because no one can read the future. I wish we could right now, actually, but
that's it. And just thinking a little bit about sort of bugs and creepy crawlies that live in the lawn. My dog has an incredible sense of smell, as lots of dogs do, and it loves digging out chafer grubs or daddy longlegs grubs. I don't know if it's a common thing, but obviously she finds it a great little game. And are chafer grubs harmful for the lawn? I mean, things like ants you often see rooting around in the lawn. Are they good, bad?
I think at the end of the day, it's a bit like anything. They have as much right to be here as we do. That's for sure.
Yep.
I suppose ultimately things that if you look at them in an objective sense, chafers, generally speaking, they tend to be in certain types of lawn. Sometimes they can be unmanicured, if you want to call it manicured, or unmaintained.
Are you casting aspersions on my lawn?
No.
You wouldn't be the first, honestly.
What you won't, I mean, you find them on sports turf, so don't take it the wrong way. You find them all over. The biggest problem with them is that one, they tend to be around for three or 4 or 5 years, in different sizes. Obviously, we don't do that much damage to them. It's the birds obviously sensing them, and in your case, your dog will sense the movement and the noise in the ground that makes them attack it, and they tend to do more damage than anything else. And that's why I've sort of looked the robot mowers being something that can prevent. And don't get me wrong, there's more thought that's got to go into the timing and everything, but we do know when chafers come out the ground. Certainly, some of them you'll have varying larvae in there at varying stages throughout that 5-year cycle. So it's only obviously once they become the Maybug that they obviously then relay eggs back into your lawn, and that's the cycle that you've got to try and break. Now, if you can reduce numbers and you can reduce them naturally, I think that's a win-win. They're in there because they don't generally travel very far. So I would think that your house would be perhaps in close proximity to a church, for example. Would that be right?
There's a church probably 200 meters, 300 meters away, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, again, you find them in villages, for example, where houses have been there for some time. The grubs might be there for some time, and sometimes they can go completely unnoticed, and you'll find them in lots of lawns where, unless you dig them out the ground, you wouldn't know they're there. So it just depends on the numbers that you've got. And as I say, the idea that I'm trying to utilize is to get the robotic mowers to almost have a pest control mode. So we know that chafers, for example, relay eggs during the evening. So if your mower can suddenly go out there and not necessarily mow, but it can be out there interfering, relaying egg habits, then you can remove that cycle and break that cycle up quite easily without the use of chemicals. So technology will bring something. We're with English Heritage, we've been testing a new biological product as well, which is, I can't say too much about it, but it's actually got a product in there that's got something used in perfume. It's totally organic, but it's something that they don't enjoy. And if successful, we may even bring it into the retail market. It's an organic product as well. So as I say, it's got retail written all over it. But yeah, chafers aren't bad. It's obviously, the thing that are looking to eat the chafers that generally cause the problems.
Okay. And are ants a problem? I mean, they just seem to sort of scurry around and
bite you.
Yeah, bite you.
Yeah, I mean, ants are, the strange thing about ants. I mean, again, I look back, strangely enough, to the film Bug's Life, which I think most people are a fan of for its humour, if anything else. But in one respect, what it does show you and what it does tell you is that, ants become a problem when it gets wet. The mounds become bigger, and they start to interfere again with that nice lawn scenario. In terms of the damage that they cause as such, I mean, that you can find in areas that they will kill off a patch, which is noticeable sometimes. But in most cases, they don't cause that much of a problem. But if we have many, many wet summers like we've had, I think the problem will come from the increasing size of the mounds that they seem to be creating, almost like molehill mounds. These, again, in terms of products, I think that biological product I just mentioned will be something usable on ants for sure in the future.
Okay.
But at the moment, there's not much you can do apart from, if you take the ant situation away and realise that there's an increase in a mound or whatever, you can always drop that a little bit lower. You can scarify it and reduce it down. You can hollow tine aerate that mound to let it collapse a little bit lower. So you can correct them without, sadly, at the present time, without being able to kill them too well. Yep. But I think that may come organically at some point as well.
And talking about killing things, I seem to remember when I first started learning about horticulture, there used to be sort of products on the market that you could kill worms in your lawn. Now, I would have thought worms were fantastic for lawns in the sense of they dig tunnels and they sort of I would have thought help create air pockets in the lawn. Is that the case? Or, I mean, obviously they make casts and that's a bit unsightly on the top of the sort of soil, but I would have thought lawns would benefit from having worms.
Absolutely. I think, when I did a talk the other day to the Swedish Federation about history, and strangely enough, chemicals obviously came up and so forth. And what I came up, or what I said was, what we don't learn from history necessarily is things that we're not told. So we'd learn in history that the first lawns were built around castles so that you could see people coming and attacking you and all that kind of thing. We think, well, hang on a minute. What about the good things that we have learned? We might not think about it, but what does history teach us? Well, history teaches us that time makes the best soils. What's in those soils? What's making them better? But for a period, and I think maybe it was around the sort of 70s and 80s, we had the nuclear approach to, and I say that tongue in cheek today, of course, but we had sort of nuclear approach to any pest or anything that deemed to not give us that perfect lawn, and that included herbicide, which I still think is somewhat too prevalent today. So in terms of worm control, we used to have a product, certainly one of the stronger, more dangerous one was called Chlordane, which got removed sometime in the 80s, I think, and rightly so. It did literally nuke everything in the ground, and sadly, they would come back in anyway. That was the main thing. They would come back, but it was always daft. And to be perfectly honest, in lawn, to remove worm casts is a little bit extreme in the best of terms. If your business, for example, like a golf club, is requiring putting surfaces 365 days a year, it's a slightly different kettle of fish. But again, we've only got 3 types of casting worm anyway, out of I think it's about 30 odd now, 30 types of worm. But yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't remove them in a million years. I think luckily all products now have been removed. Again, there are natural products that are looking to suppress them. Luckily, the nuclear approach went in the 80s, and the only things that have been around in terms of agriculture or professional horticulture were suppressants. And they worked on creating almost a barrier that the worms didn't like to go through. Still sounds pretty awful.
Yep.
But the suppressants have been removed a number of years ago. And, it's a sign that your soils are alive, so, the worm cast idea to me is a joy. So I certainly wouldn't ever remove them. Maybe, like I say, maybe we need to rethink about bringing bees and brooms back into the marketplace more than the past. But I certainly think they've got a place to play. They're a little worker out there, and anything that can make our lawn work easier, then you certainly wouldn't do anything but enhance it, would you? Where you could.
Indeed not. David, on the thoughts of obviously weeds, we had in the gardening trade last year a big campaign to encourage everybody to no mow in May. I think it went down quite well. We certainly got quite a lot of reaction when we did our podcast earlier on in the year to it. So what's your thoughts on the whole idea of cutting down the amount of mowing to encourage some of those wonderful flowers to perhaps develop in the lawn to help our bees and pollinating insects?
Yeah, I mean, again, having the two sort of interact is a slight weird one for me. That's the only thing. If you don't mow in May, if you're looking after a lawn per se, or want lawn to be the most dominant thing there, then no mow May is dreadful, because you lose tons of plant energy. In terms of having a corner of your garden or even the whole garden turning, I suppose, over time with flowers and more bee friendly, then absolutely for it. I mean, I can't think of anything better. But of course, not everybody wants that type of lawn. But I think it's very difficult to have your cake and eat it. I think it's very difficult to have a beautiful lawn, not mow it for probably the best growing month you get.
Yeah.
To suddenly allow bees to grow just for 1 month, or bees to pollinate or whatever. Don't get me wrong, I'm nothing but 1,000% behind it. I just think that if you can't have both, you would be better to have an area in your garden, perhaps that's completely over to pollinators, for example. It's a nice. Don't get me wrong. It's a nice sort of catchphrase, and it's obviously got certain people talking. Personally, yeah, I'd rather not mow for 12 months, let alone May. If I really pollinators there, then again with the changing conditions, I saw a bumblebee yesterday. You think, well, there's no plants up at the moment. But what if there was, or if there were, we wouldn't particularly want to chop them down at the moment. But if I had an area dedicated to them, maybe some areas would be better. Grass is a very difficult thing to compete with. So having that perfect mix is always a very difficult one. It happens naturally, but grass will dominate most plants, and that can include the pollinators. So it can be done, don't get me wrong, but I personally, I'd rather have a corner of my garden over the pollinators if I was that concerned. But I would equally look after my lawn very sustainably in the other aspect as well. So I wouldn't be damaging anything more in the ground by using the right fertilizers and soil conditioners, the right pest controls if I've got a pest problem. So yeah, I'm like I say, I'm 100% behind it, 1,000% behind it. I said earlier, I can't drop that to 100. And I think everyone's got their entitlement for it. Would I recommend it? Just be careful. I think you might struggle with your lawn during a period that let's be fair, we can hit a drought in May these days, and if you don't mow it for a month, yeah, the pollinators will survive, but your lawn might look a bit rubbish as well. So it's a tricky one for me.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think a very considered answer. I think, yeah, it has its place. And as you say, just giving a little bit of a space over within your lawn to such an area might be the way forward. But I can see both arguments. But in a way, anything we can do is an advantage to those wonderful pollinators and bees.
Yeah.
And David, we always like to ask our guests to choose a desert island plant or a piece of garden equipment should you ever be a virtual castaway. So, David, what would be yours?
Well, I think, again, the one, if I had to sort of take something which would make people think about their lawns, and it's something that, as I said earlier, it's something that I would take with me, because I'm not saying, are you talking about a desert island here?
Yeah, so...
A desert island that grows a lovely lawn.
Yeah, that sounds good, doesn't it?
If I was taking, I was thinking, well, would I take a bunker rake or something and just rake lots of bunkers in the sand? But truthfully, the one piece of equipment which we haven't quite made properly yet in the UK is a hollow tine fork, because that's the one thing that everybody should be doing to their lawn, because it's not that we're doing anything other than balancing out what nature's already done. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to nurture nature, but nature can't control everything, because we got so many different permutations in our gardens. But if everyone hollow tine forks their lawn, they'd be in a far, far better position than if they don't. So that would be it.
Brilliant.
That's a positive note to end on, isn't it? Yeah, so, virtual castaway, hollow tine fork. There you go. Today's show was brought to you by Buckingham Garden Centre and Nurseries. The show was hosted by Chris Day and Peter Brown. The show was produced by Peter Brown. And our thanks to Chiltern Music Therapy for providing the music. Thanks for listening.
At Chiltern Music Therapy, we want everyone to know the difference that music can make in their lives. From parents and their premature babies in hospital to grandparents with dementia. We provide music therapy and community music services to people of all ages and needs across England. We work both digitally and in person in people's homes, care homes, schools, hospitals and hospices. Find out more at chilternmusictherapy.co.uk.